Welcome to the Sheffield Sunday as Bill Sees It meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Matthew M. from California, who's come to share for around 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing or if you'd like to ask a question. Matthew, it's wonderful to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm just setting my timer to give you guys hope. My name's Matthew. I have alcoholism. I come to you from Southern California. My sobriety date's May 16th, 1993. It's good to see you, Serena. The topic I picked when Lee sent me that the choices was fear, because I just feel like it's something that's brought a lot of growth to me. First of all, just dealing with it and recognizing that I'm in it. I mean, for a long time before I got sober and when I was newly sober, there's this phrase that I love from the third step prayer. It says, relieve me of the bondage of self. And my experience is one of the key symptoms that I'm in the bondage of self is if I'm in fear. And I don't know how many people are new on this meeting, but I'll just describe that my alcoholism, it just said in the reading, self-centered fear triggers our character defects. But, the last several months of my drinking, probably 7 or 8 months of my drinking, almost every day in May of 1993, I didn't want to drink. And I had a lot of problems, and I thought that my circumstances were my real problems. I had been fired from a number of jobs. I lost a musical career that was, kind of a B-plus musical career. We were all paying our mortgages and touring and making albums. And I lost that a couple of years before. I lost some jobs I couldn't believe that I lost because I thought they were beneath me. I was so arrogant. And I'd gotten a girl pregnant at one of my jobs. She was 18. I was 30 years old. And I had come from a very loving family. My parents were married for 50 years. I was just full of shame. So I ended up just sitting in this apartment, isolating. And I would wake up in the morning and say, don't drink today, out loud to myself. And it wasn't for the noble reasons anymore. It wasn't because I should stand up and be a good father for this baby that was coming. I couldn't face that. I was terrified of that. And my mother was dying of cancer a few miles away, and I tried to slow down or get my act together many times over her cancer diagnosis, and all this debt I'd fallen into, and the police, warrants for my arrest, and all those things. Those reasons were gone. I just didn't want to drink in the morning because I was sick all the time. I had diarrhea and the dry heaves, and it was not a party. And I wake up in the morning and say, don't drink today. And the alcoholism is a funny thing because I'd believe me. I'd immediately think, okay, good. Finally, I'm not going to drink, even though I said it yesterday and the day before and the day before. But I'd wake up, I was extremely thin when I got sober. I weighed 108 pounds. Right now, I'm 165 pounds. And I'm actually shorter because I'm much older. But I was taller then, and I weighed 108 pounds. And I'd get up in the morning thinking, I'm not going to drink. And I'm glad that's settled because I'm so tired of this hamster wheel of fog and sickness. And then walking down the hall, I'd turn in maybe, I don't know, I'm just saying a perhaps day in May, and get into the shower. And, and I don't know about all of you all over the world, in the UK. My wife's from Cardiff, Wales. We're going to be out there pretty soon. But I was, single, nothing, but I walk in, get in the shower and turn on the water, and that hot water would hit me. And where 10 minutes ago, I was the worst person in the world. I was terribly ill. I didn't want to face life. The water in the shower would make me feel 8% better, like dangerously almost okay. And but I'm not drinking, and I'm getting clean now, and I'm feeling better. And then I think a thought, a lot of times back then my thoughts would be go visit mom. I love my mother. I love my father. And my parents were responsible for nurturing my musical talent, and they were responsible for giving me a love of reading. And I always think that one of the things that I lost with drinking that I never thought I'd get back was a gift my parents gave me. And that was character, dignity, and self-respect. And those were gone And I didn't know that they'd ever come back because I didn't think anyone could give those back to you. But I'd want to go see my mother. So now I'm not drinking, I'm getting clean, and I'm a nice guy. I'm going to go see my mom. I'm like 90% better than when I woke up, and I've been awake 20 minutes. And then that bondage of self-fear, it just comes out of nowhere. I'm getting out of the shower. I'm going to go see mom, and I have a thought. And the thought is, what does my mother know about my life, and what does my mother not know? Because I lied a lot. Do they know that I actually can't go back and play music with the band, that I'm not taking a sabbatical? Do they know that there's a pregnant girl with their grandchild who's 8 months pregnant? Do they know, that I'm unemployable, that I'm wanted by the police? I was a good kid. I have 2 degrees. I graduated at the top of my class. And then I went on tour with the band for 10 years. Everything I ever wanted to do, I could do. And now I'm just sitting in this apartment dying of alcoholism, and that fear would come into my eyes. I'd be shaving thinking, well, if I go over there, are they going to throw me some curveballs? Are they going to judge me? Are they upset? Are they disappointed? Are they broken heart? I don't know. And I would have thought I visited them 2 weeks ago. Back in that time, I spent all my time sitting on my couch drinking. There was a liquor store next door. And I would think, I probably went there just a few weeks ago because no time was passing in my ugly apartment, but time was passing out there. And I hadn't gone to visit them for almost 8 months when I got sober, a few weeks after this day I'm kind of describing. And so I'd think to myself, and this is for if you're new, I'm not here speaking at this meeting because of my circumstances. I'm here speaking at this meeting because I have alcoholism and I've been in recovery for 32 years. And what happened usually is I'd be shaving and in fear that I'm going to go over there and I don't know what I'm walking into. And I would think a very innocent thought. I think I'm just going to have 2 beers from next door. And no, I'm not being sarcastic. I think we all speak the same language. 2 beers was not drinking. I drink gin and I drink it as fast as I can because I want to get there, and 2 beers just wasn't that. I just was going to get 2 beers next door at the liquor store and just settle down enough so I could kind of feel them out, shuck and jive, not be so tense, ask some probing questions, find out what they know and what they don't know. And I'll be okay. So I'm not drinking today. I'm going to go see my mom. I just took a shower. I'm in a good spot. And I go next door to the liquor store and the 2 beers look too small. Then I get 2 Fosters. And then by the time I got to the counter, I'm looking over that guy's shoulder and there's a bottle of gin and I can pay exactly what I'm paying for these Fosters for that bottle of gin. But I'm just going to have 1 hit off it and go see my mom. So fear fueled my alcoholism. I just would go home and sit there and take a little bit of that gin. I'm going to get up now. I'm going to go see mom. And, that gin kind of calmed me down a little bit. So I'm just going to have a little bit more gin. And then pretty soon I'm drinking that gin pretty fast because I have to forget that I was going to go see my mother. And I can't stand myself. So I need to feel different. So fear was a big player in the end of my drinking and keeping me on the hamster wheel. And once I taste that gin, the phenomenon of craving, I'm done. I'm pawning my guitars. And I know I'm actually an alcoholic and not primarily a drug addict because I once pawned a guitar to a drug dealer and I took the money and went and bought alcohol. He was my drug dealer, but I went and got drunk. So when I got sober, which I don't have time to talk about because I want to talk about fear today, a lot of, there was a ton of fear. I'd gotten sober. The day I got sober, my brother 12-stepped me because in May is Mother's Day in the United States. And I ruined Mother's Day for my dying mother. I showed up, but I was drunk and they finally saw me after 8 months and they didn't know what had happened to me. I'd lost all that weight and I looked like hell. And so I got sober and when I got 30 days, I'd had, this is important. My child was born the day I got sober, Phoebe Rose. And so when I saw them, I got to the hospital through a series of mishaps. I went to the wrong hospital and I was supposed to be going to rehab, and I'd been drinking all night. I ran into the hospital room and I saw Anna, this girl, and she got up and she was glad to see me. And I felt ashamed because the last time I saw her, I had pushed her down some stairs because that's who I became in my alcoholism. And when she was coming towards me, I was afraid. I was afraid she was going to hug me because I was disgustingly dirty. I hadn't showered and changed my clothes in days. And then she handed me Phoebe. She didn't hug me, and Phoebe was beautiful. And I felt like I was going to throw up because, again, I didn't know it, but I was in the bondage of self. And in the bondage of self, all I can see is, how does this affect me? What does this say about me? I can't see the perfect beauty of having a child for the first time. I mean, it's amazing. I've been with tens of sponsees to watch them have their first child. And I just looked at them and they were beautiful and I was filthy and disgusting and I couldn't stand being around them because I couldn't make this okay. And so I went home to kill myself. I had a gun somebody left at my house, and I drove home and my brother was standing on my porch. He'd been waiting to take me to rehab. And if you're new here, we call that grace. When something happens that I couldn't have brought about on my own power and it changes the direction of my life, it's called grace. And my brother, if he hadn't been standing there, I'd have a hole in my head. I did not want to live and see my mother die of cancer. I did not want to be a father to that daughter. And it wasn't, I want to be clear also, I want to say, be respectful to people who suffer from depression. I wasn't depressed. I was a coward. Depression is, I can't face the day. It's a deep, deep sadness. That is chemical. Cowardice is, I've made too much of a mess to face this. So I ended up in rehab, and 30 days later, I got out of rehab and I felt like a new guy. I'd gained 47 pounds in rehab. That's about all I remember from rehab. I'm sure we did a lot of stuff, but I was really tired. And we were reading stuff and sharing, and I was a little bit, felt like a guy from Mars visiting Earth for my first several months of sobriety. But anyway, I got home and my brother said, go to a meeting. And one of the things fear makes me do is it makes me lie. And my brother said, go to a meeting, and I lied and said, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. I just wanted him to leave because I wanted to clean up my apartment. I wanted to get nice, do my laundry. I wanted to go visit my dying mother. I wanted to see my child. But I'll get to a meeting, next week, but I'm not going to a meeting today. And I ran up into my apartment and I opened the door, and there was a party. It was full of people. They were snorting cocaine on my glass table and smoking pot, and somebody handed me a beer, and I didn't know anybody, and I lived there by myself. So people had found out I was gone, and they broke into my apartment. And these people that were there at that time didn't even know it was my apartment. They were actually welcoming me to this party, and I had 30 days and no self-respect, dignity, or character. But I had another one of those moments of grace. I was looking around the room and I thought, I got nothing. My guitars are gone. I don't know where they went. This music, I don't know this music. It's playing in my house. This is my house. Where I live is gone to me now. A lot of my valuable stuff, which wasn't much, was gone. But I had a thought. And if you meditate, you're not always in charge of the thoughts that come into your head. And out of the blue, I heard myself think, you got 30 days and you've never had 30 days. Are you going to throw it away on these losers again? This is how I got kicked out of the band. I went away with the fun people. So from that one little grace, that one little involuntary electrical impulse in my brain that said, hey man, you got one thing, I ran away. So that fear, like it said in the reading, served me. And I ran to a payphone and I called AA. And another really odd moment of grace in my story is I called AA from this payphone. And I was so scared, and I told the guy all my details. I used to play music, and my mom got cancer. I just had a baby, like nothing he needed to know. But I was afraid, and I thought maybe he'll send a car and a therapist and some bottled water, and we can straighten this stuff out. And it was AA, man. He listened to me babble, and he just goes, where are you? And I go, well, I'm in this payphone on the corner of Burl and Redondo Beach Boulevard. And he said, that's so weird. And I said, what's weird? And he said, there's a meeting right across the street from where you're standing. And I'm so emotional because I can't believe my grace. That was 32 years ago. I haven't had a drink in 32 years. And it was seconds and inches all the way. And I went to this meeting. This will tell you what fear did to me. He said, there's a meeting right across the street from where you're standing, and it starts in 15 minutes. And I said, what do you think I should do? That's great and everything, but, I'm kind of a mess. I did describe to you that I need real help. Anyway, he said I should go to the meeting, and I didn't want to because I was afraid. I was afraid for a year, easily a year. And so I'm going to hurry this up through a series of events. I couldn't go back to my apartment. This guy walked by who knew my brother who 12-stepped me. He drove me to my parents' house against my will. And I'm standing outside my parents' house. And I'm so afraid. I'm afraid because my mom and dad have been married for 45 years. And I can clearly see this scene. My mom's really sick. She's dying. My father is beside himself with fear that he's going to lose his wife. Their loser son, fresh out of rehab with an illegitimate child across town, shows up on their porch. I thought it was humiliating for them. I thought it was awful to impose on them. I thought it was just terrible for me. I played at CBGB's in New York City a year before that. I was at the top of my game in my craft, in my profession. And I'm standing with no possessions, just when I ran away from my apartment on the porch. And I thought it was the worst possible scenario. Couldn't have been worse. I was so afraid. I wanted to run away, that I come from the suburbs. There's only other parents' house around, and one of the moments of grace there is what kept me on the porch is I looked down because my mom was strapped to oxygen and they come to the door together. So they took a long time to answer the door, and that guy had driven away. And I looked down and there was a guitar pick with my signature on it on the porch. And I hadn't been there in months. And they were clean, fastidious people. It just was like seeing something that was out of place. And I got curious. And they opened the door. And they were glad to see me. Like really, really glad. My mom gasped a little when she saw me. And I know now, but I didn't know then, that my perception had nothing to do with reality. My perception was of all those things I just described. The reality was, they've been married for 45 years. They're madly in love with each other. And they've been kneeling down by their bed every night, praying for their boy, terrified that what had become of me. I was the good kid, And my mom opened the door and it was like a prayer got answered. I didn't know that. I've raised 4 children sober and Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sober, thank God for them. But I raised 4 children to adulthood. And I said the sentence that I didn't know every parent wants to hear to my parents that night on the porch. I said, hey, I need your help. They were so glad. So my perception is clouded with guilt, shame, fear, regret, anticipation, projection. How can I see perfect reality looking through that muddy kaleidoscope? I can't see anything. So I spent a whole year cleaning out my kaleidoscope till I think one day my sponsor just threw the kaleidoscope away and goes, just sit here with us, Don't look through all that crap you look through. So I started getting sober. You know why I went to meetings? really a lot of meetings. I didn't like being in my parents' house. They made me nervous. And that's a funny kind of fear, right? You know, I don't know about you, but I kind of ran with animals, and then even the animals wouldn't hang out with me anymore. And now here I am at my parents' house, and they're like kind, courteous, forgiving. Who can put up with that kind of living? You know, I felt weird all the time. I'm like, God, this is how I was raised, and I don't know how to fit in here anymore because of where I've been. So I just went to meetings to get away from my parents' house. And then I ran back to my parents' house to get away from you guys because you made me nervous too. So I was driven by 100 forms of fear for a long, long time. And what really helped was these crazy steps. You know, I remember when we got to the third step, I didn't know my sponsor very long. And he said, we're going to kneel down on my kitchen floor here. And I'm sorry, my nose is running. And he said, we're going to hold hands. We're going to kneel down on my floor and hold hands. And I'm going to say this prayer and you're going to say it after me. And I'm like, no way. I'm not doing that. That seems really awkward. I don't want to kneel on my floor with you, man. On your floor. I didn't say it. I just was afraid. He was not afraid. He was very calm and sure that this is what we should do. And he knelt down on the floor, and he looked weird down there by himself. So I got down on the floor and we held hands, and we were like nose to nose. We were like making out on his kitchen floor, and it's weird already. And then he says, God, I offer myself to thee. And I said, God, I offer myself to thee. He said, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. And I said, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. And then he said, relieve me of the bondage of self. And even then, even brand new, full of fear, I knew I wanted that. And I said, relieve me of the bondage of self. And I said the rest of the prayer, and I got up, and I have to tell everyone, I didn't think, oh my God, I feel so great. I just gave my life to God. I thought, thank God that's over. I was really happy when we both stood up, right? But when I was driving home that day, in my parents' car, because my car had died, a lot of full of pride and arrogance. But I'm driving home and I'm thinking, Matthew, you just did something you don't really understand, that you really didn't want to do, that made you really uncomfortable because you don't want to live the way you've been living. And that's this whole program. Everything in this program is going a little past how comfortable I am and a little past what I rationally understand to live a spiritual life. That's the whole thing. And I drove home feeling different. I didn't know that I gave my life to God or anything. That's it. My sponsor said, you're going to do that by doing a real 4-step. And and I had good things happen to me. And there's something I really want to talk about, a few things about fear that I learned. I want to talk about prayer and meditation. Prayer and meditation have been a great reliever of fear for me. But when I first got here, I came from Catholic school. I was terrified of nuns. I really was. I mean, I'm not kidding. We called them the witches of God where I come from because they inflicted intense guilt by saying very quiet, very surgical sentences to young men growing up. And I had all this baggage, and I was, with my sponsor doing the steps, and I'm reading step 11. It said, prayed only for knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry that out. And that filled me with fear. God's will for me is that I die in a fiery crash. God hates me. And before I got sober, I felt like that. Before I, got to be full-blown alcoholic. But by the time I'm an alcoholic, I almost killed my child. I pushed that woman down a flight of stairs. I'd done horrible things drinking. I was dishonest. All my values were gone. I had no character, dignity, or self-respect. And so now I knew God hated me. I didn't want to know what God's will was for me. I was afraid of it. So I asked my sponsor, I go, I don't really like this. I don't understand that. It's a little ambiguous. Prayed only for knowledge of God's will for me. And he said, maybe you're making it a little more complicated. He waited. He thought about it for a couple of days, but he finally said, maybe you're making this too complicated. And I go, how's that? And he said, well, maybe, when the alarm clock goes off, God just wants you to get up. So maybe when a bill comes in the mail and says, pay this amount, God's leaning over your shoulder going, hey, pay that amount. And maybe when Phoebe smells funny, you're supposed to change the baby. Maybe if you just do the next indicated thing, you'll be doing God's will. He told me that 32 years ago, and it changed my life. It reduced my fear. I've heard people say the next right action. That's a judgment call. I don't have character, dignity, or self-respect early in sobriety. I'm not a good judge of the next right action. But I can do the next indicated thing. And you know, somebody came up to me and challenged me once about that. He goes, what else could you possibly do but the next indicated thing? And I'll tell you, the next grandiose plan. That's what I normally did. You know, I just make stuff up that was against the rules, didn't make any sense, but I was going to get a big payoff. And, you know, that's one of the funny things of what you learn when you find out your circumstances are not your problems and you do these steps is, you know, yes, I have alcoholism. I can't stop drinking. I'm obsessed with it. Once I start drinking, I can't stop at all. But once I have a little break, once I have some days, then I'm still a pleasure seeker. That took a long time to get rid of. And, you know, when I seek pleasure, it's, you know, I used to say I chased it. It doesn't run away. It's easy to catch. Like when you pursue pleasure, you can catch it. It even stands still, you know. But when I would pursue pleasure, I would get it, exhaust it, do it to such a degree that I would demean myself and those around me. And I was filled with fear, and I felt that pleasure was somehow adding to my sense of eternity, to my sense of okayness. But in AA, I've learned about another element that floats around the universe and is attached to this grace, and it's called joy. And you have to make room for joy. You can't chase it. And these steps have made room in me to receive joy. And so I'm gonna race ahead because I want to tell you a couple things. But I married a beautiful woman. My Anna married someone else, and I met someone and madly in love with her. Still madly in love with her. She's asleep right behind me. I've been madly in love with her. I married her 30 years ago. I look at her every morning and I can't believe my luck. I'm just one of those guys. I'm sickening to listen to when I talk about my wife. But early, you know, we were parenting Phoebe and we had a couple of kids of our own. And early in our marriage, my wife had a catastrophic event. She had a stroke. And I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I was away while she was in ICU for a little while. And I went to the hospital. I was out of town. It's a very complicated story, but I went to the hospital. I expected her to look better than she did, and she looked worse. And I expected her to be farther along in her recovery, and there was no recovery. And I was afraid. I was so afraid because she was the alpha partner. She made sure that, you know, things got done. My job was to love her and take care of the kids and go to work every day. And that was over now. My job was everything. And I didn't even know that. I had a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And my wife's paralyzed and brain damage in the hospital. And the thing I wanted to tell you about is that visit. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was filled with fear. Like fear I've never had before. Like I could taste metal in my mouth. I knew I couldn't handle all this. I knew I couldn't raise these children without her. I knew that I couldn't take care of her in this condition and go to work every day. And I just felt like awful. I felt like that old coward I used to be before I got sober. And I'm 7 years sober now. And I'm sitting up in bed and I'm scared to death. And I don't want to scare her. She's sleeping. They let me sleep next to her. I broke all the rules. So I just said, I'm not leaving. I'm staying here. And I got out of bed and the nurses had left like a couple of like little towels and some soap. They could see I had no luggage. I just flew there from Chicago. So I thought, okay, I'll take a shower. And I was walking to the shower. I was so afraid. And I got in the shower and I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown, I'll admit. And I remember my grand sponsor had said, pray with the intensity that you know your prayers are being answered. So I took all my clothes off and I turned the shower and I wasn't hugely convinced that there was a being listening to me when I prayed. But I got down on my knees and I prayed so intensely just to be up to the job. I just said, God, you know, I need the power to do the next thing. And I don't think I'm the guy. I'd love to be the guy, but I don't think I can. And I was so embarrassed, but I knew I couldn't do it. I knew my limits, and I was praying, and I know I'm not supposed to pray for myself or for power, but I need power. And I prayed with such intensity. And I stayed down there on my knees, and I stood up, and nothing changed. Nothing. I was filled with fear. I didn't think I could do it. I got dressed, right off and dressed, and I even hid in the shower for a little while. It was a great big orthopedic room. I didn't know what to do when I went back to a room, so I did eventually go, and I sat in a chair that looked out the door. I couldn't look at her because she was very badly damaged, and I was afraid. And I closed my eyes, and I remember thinking, wow, I can feel Philippa. I can feel her in the room. And I just candidly noticed that I knew she was there. And I thought, I bet if I were blind and I walked through a building, I could find my wife. And just, random thinking. And then I finally got up, and I didn't want to look at her. So I turned around and I looked over her bed. There was a big window over her bed, and it was 4:30 in the morning. So the sun wasn't even quite up. But I could see there was some stuff moving around. There was these black blotches outside the window, and then there was these little, like, short bursts of movement. And it caught me off guard, and I leaned forward, and I realized they were birds. They were little birds waking up in this tree at dawn. And I just very innocently received this. And I thought, wow, the world is so beautiful. And then I accidentally glanced at my wife, and she has this beautiful Welsh skin, pale skin, and blue eyes. And she just opened her eyes and looked at me, and I thought, oh my God, I love this woman so much. And there was no fear. It was gone. And I've raised children. I've dealt with this, my wife's disability. Actually, she's dealt with it. I've just done stuff around the house. And I've prayed a lot. And I don't think there is necessarily anything that I'm praying to that's going to change my circumstances. But when I pray, I can change my perception of my circumstances. And suddenly I can do what I couldn't do a minute ago. That's how these steps have helped me relieve me of fear. A few months later, I was driving down the freeway, and I was getting up to speed in this job, and I was getting a handle on getting the kids ready in the morning and getting Pip dressed and fed and getting out the door to work. And we had somebody come in during the day back then. But I had a panic attack. I call them self-esteem heat-seeking missiles. I'm driving down the freeway, and I start thinking, I'm terrible at this job. If they ever find out that I don't know what I'm doing, I have a degree in English and religious studies, and I'm working in cardiovascular medicine. This is crazy, and I'm terrible. And my kids, I shouldn't get college funds for my kids. I should get funds for lifetimes of therapy because I'm such a terrible dad. Like, I'm driving down the freeway, just everything about me is being taken away by my psyche. And then I thought, Philippa is going to wake up one day screaming and would not believe that she married me. And I was just losing my mind. And I called my sponsor from my car, and he didn't answer. And so I called my grand sponsor, Jay, and I told him what was going on in my head. I just told him all the truth of my life, that I'm actually a big phony, and it's all going to be done in a few minutes. And he just laughed. And I go, why are you laughing? And he said, well, why don't we pretend for just a second that you're not in charge? And then I started laughing because I forgot. I just forgot. Sometimes I forget. And he said, I got an idea. What are you doing? I go, I'm driving on the 710 freeway. He goes, why don't you be the best guy that ever drove on the 710 freeway? And just do that. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, you know what fear is, Matthew? Fear is the false belief that you won't have the resources you need to meet the challenges of the present moment. That's all that fear is. It's the false belief you won't have the resources you need to meet the challenges of the present moment. And I hung up the phone and I thought, he's right. I'm 45 years old at that time. I'm 63 now. And I remember thinking, I've been afraid for 45 years. And yet every day I've had the resources I needed or I wouldn't be here. And that made fear go away a lot. I'm just going to end with this. I always try to talk about what it's like now, and I never get a chance to do it. I never do. I always get caught up 30 years ago with weird stuff that happened on the day I got sober. So I get to indulge myself. I have a sponsee that said to me one time, we were leading a retreat together. He's a really great dude. I've been sponsoring him since he was 15. He's in his 30s now. And he said, I think the word spiritual simply means the spirit I bring to the ritual of my life. What's the spirit I bring to the ritual of my life? And so I believe in that, right? And so when we moved down here and I woke up, I used to wake up and I don't know if people can relate to this, but my computer hard drive boots up in negative mode. Like when I open my eyes, I don't think, what a beautiful world. I wake up and I go, oh, it's another day. Oh, sorry. I swore on the tape. I'm sorry. My name's Andrew E. and I'm from the UK for the tape. But anyway, I wake up in the morning. This is a couple of years ago. I can really remember it. And I think, you're never going to have enough money to retire. As soon as I open my eyes and I'm thinking, Jesus, I just opened my eyes. Everybody chill out for a second. I'm already never going to stop working. And I just woke up. And then I put my feet on the side of the bed and I'd look over at Pip sleeping. I think, her gait, her paralyzed side of her body is slumping. I bet she's going to end up in a wheelchair and we're not going to get to travel like we're planning on doing. And then, I get stand up, I'm walking down the hall and my son, who's doing very well, I think his anxiety is going to come back. He's going to have panic attacks again and we're going to have to get him into a hospital. And, then I get to I always make my wife coffee. I have since the first night we slept together. And so I turn the kettle on and I go, oh, I forgot my powerless pill. That's what's wrong with me. I think I have power over all these things. I'm really just supposed to, if you're new, there's no pill. It's really not a pill. It's a metaphor. I forgot that I was powerless. I forget sometimes. Now, I'm not passive. I'm powerless. I don't have power over the outcomes. I have to play my role. This little boy, a friend of mine's a teacher, and this little boy brought a poem to school, and they had to write a poem describing themselves. And most of them said, I like candy and, I have toys and we go to the beach. And he's a second grader. And this kid said, I'm very small. I'm very small. I'm very small, but I'm part of it all. That was his poem. And I think about that a lot. So I got my powerless pill in place. I'm making the kettle. What's the spirit I'm going to bring to the ritual? Well, what am I doing? I'm making a cup of coffee for the woman I love most on earth. I'm going to make that woman the best cup of coffee she's ever had. And man, when you take a little bit of care doing pour over coffee and adding just the right sugar and cream, there's no room for fear. There's just room for love. Real big love. And then I take her that coffee and she wakes up 6 hours later and thank God for thermal cups, and I go in and do my meditation and prayer. And today I had to skip that because I had to come talk to you guys. It says in the 12th step, in the 12 and 12, the first sentence is the joy of living is the theme of AA's 12 steps. That's the thing you make room for, joy. And it far surpasses pleasure. And I'm living proof. Thanks for letting me share.